What is going on, everyone? And welcome to another episode of the show. I am Nathan Marzion, joined by Brandon Eckel, as always, and we have a bunch of stuff to get to. This is our first live stream slash podcast since Buck season started, and it's been a shaky start. 6 games in, not really what most people expected. It's been a difficult 6 games. It's been an ugly 6 games. It's been just not pretty overall, but they are 4-2. They found ways to win games, and I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it's a long it's a long season, and I think a lot of people are hopefully kind of staying patient with it. I know Buck's Twitter does not always stay patient with things, but um, offense hasn't looked as dominant as people thought they would look. The defense has struggled, which was somewhat expected coming in. I mean, I don't think anyone expected them to be great defensively, but they've struggled even more than people, expected. They're right now sitting at 10th in offensive rating and 24th in defensive rating. So, neither one has been overly impressive. And just overall, they just don't have that flow. They don't seem like they know quite how to play together yet, which again, it's early. That's somewhat expected. I don't think people expected it to be as ugly as it has been, but still, again, the fact that they're still 4-2 despite that, and the fact that it's so early in the season, I still have plenty of hope for this team, and I'm not overreacting at all. I'm not freaking out at all, but definitely some, some concerning stuff, some ugly stuff. What have you noticed, Brandon? What are your thoughts on the first 6 games of the season?
Well, I mean, obviously, kind of the same stuff you outlined. It's like offense just doesn't seem to be flowing. Defense struggling to get stops, kind of giving up easy baskets at times. A lot in the Toronto game, especially. Few games with a lot of turnovers. Kind of the inconsistent shots from their shooters to start the year, which is kind of to be expected, especially with who we have. So, I mean, I'm kind of in the middle with I don't like looking this bad, but I know that it's going to take time, and we, got Dame later in the process and hasn't had a ton of time. So, um, yeah, I think it just continue to improve, and I think there just needs to be a bigger emphasis on defense because it feels like they're not really either bought in or the scheme already just doesn't look good. It hasn't been working. So,
The Raptors game was genuinely one of the worst games I've ever seen a good Bucks team play. I mean, it
mhm.
was they weren't doing anything offensively, and defensively they were atrocious. Like, it was just they could not do anything right in that game. It's been better since that game. Um, like, and again, it hasn't been anything close to perfect. It hasn't been anything close to great, but definitely have improved since then. And um, defensively, I mean, the one thing you can't criticize Griff about, I know a lot of people are already skeptical about Coach Griffin, but the one thing you can't criticize him about is a lack of adjustments, which was our biggest complaint about Bud.
Mhm.
Um, he's changed things up. They've gone with, they've gone to zone. They've brought Brooke out for the first part of the season. They went really aggressive. Then they kind of went back to going to the drop a little bit. They've switched up rotations. Last night we saw them put in Bobby late in the game and take out Brooke. They've put Giannis on ball as a defender more when, we saw Embiid get hot in game one and they put Giannis on him. We've seen Giannis guard the other team's best player like several times now. They started going to some double team stuff with Cam Thomas last night that you just never would have really seen with Bud. So that's an intriguing thing, and again, not everything's worked. It hasn't all been good, but that they're willing to go to that stuff and they're willing to change it up mid-game. I do like that.
Mhm.
And again, they brought Brooke out too far in coverage. It seemed like in those first few games, and then the Knicks game was the first game they went back to kind of putting him near the basket, and that worked well in that Knicks game. But I mean, ultimately, I think the most frustrating part of the season so far has been just the offense not clicking because you really felt like that was something that should come rather easy. Is okay, you've got Dame, you've got Giannis, you've got Chris, you've got Brooke, you've got shooters. Like, this shouldn't be that hard to make it work.
Mhm.
It's been harder than it needs to be. It's been uglier than it feels like it needs to be. They aren't running the Dame Giannis pick and roll enough, it seems. Not using Giannis as a screener enough, it seems. But again, it's slowly getting better in my opinion. I think since the first couple of games of the year, um, and still not sure kind of how Brooke is fitting in to this system yet.
Hmm.
And I mean, there's been several role players that have played pretty well, which I'm happy about. Jay Crowder's looked really good. He's shooting 52% from three. Marjan's looks pretty good. He's shooting like 57% from three, and both of those guys have played pretty good defense and have been good in their minutes. Um, but still, it hasn't been as easy as people thought. And I do think they're overcomplicating things a little bit just by not constantly going to that Dame Giannis pick and roll, because it seems like it generates a good look on almost every possession you run
Hmm.
it on, as it should. I mean, um, and Dame has struggled as he normally does, kind of coming out of the gate. He's struggled a little bit offensively. The shot isn't quite there. How do you feel about the offense so far?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you think that maybe they're, I mean, it sounds kind of dumb, but afraid to kind of like show the pick and roll, like different things they want to do because it's early in the season? Or, I mean, it feels like that's something that you wouldn't really think about, like, oh, you shouldn't really worry about other teams figuring it out right away. But I mean, that's the only thing that could come to my mind, I guess, because it seems pretty obvious to run that with them.
I could see, like, I don't think they're afraid to show it, but I could see them saying, okay, we know we have that in our back pocket at all times, and that's something we're going to rely on later.
Hmm.
But let's use this start of the season to really hammer down other stuff so that we have counters if we ever have to go to other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's the case. I don't know that's the case, but I mean, it does seem like once they get to situations where they really are in tight spots late and they really need to run it, they're going to it. And they're like, okay, like they're not afraid to go to it when they need to, but they're just not doing it consistently throughout the game. So that kind of tells me maybe that's the case. Is they're like, okay, we know as soon as we need to, we'll go to the pick and roll with Damon Giannis all the time, but
Hmm.
maybe they're just trying to work out other stuff and get everyone acclimated instead of just running Damon Giannis all the time. They kind of want to try out some other stuff. I don't know, but all I know is at the and I've said multiple times, I'm not gonna judge things too much at all, good or bad, in the first um, couple months of this season. Like I'm waiting until probably the new year to really start to like want to like to really start judging this team and really start looking at everything as like, okay, this is what they're really like. Because new team, new coach, new scheme, it's gonna take time, and they've said that multiple times. They've all said they're a little bit uncomfortable with each other, but I'm just hoping that by January, February, they are really running it more and more, and by the time the playoffs come, it's really just like the focal point of their offense is just the Dame Giannis pick and roll, and they're not afraid to just run it until the other team can stop it.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I think if anything, that's got to be something like, hey, we need a basket. We're gonna go to that, or end of game. There's 2 minutes left. You go to that. It just opens up the offense a lot. We've seen that already with Giannis hitting shooters in the corner, but that also leads me to something with, and I know it's only 6 games in, Dame assist numbers being down, Giannis assist numbers being way down. So that's something that's a little, I don't want to say concerning, but something that I've noticed and kind of watching where it's like these are guys that should be distributing the ball more. And some of it's just some guys not making shots, and like assists isn't always a great way to look at it. But um, on top of that, Brooke hasn't been great. I think he's shooting about 39% and about like 32, 33% from three. So he's kind of struggled to start the year. And obviously Chris with kind of the inconsistent minutes and missing a couple games. So think also once you're kind of getting to that flow, Chris playing 25, 30 minutes like you will, and just getting, more of a rhythm on offense obviously will help everybody. So,
Yeah, and I mean, the Dame and Giannis just need to get more comfortable with each other. You can just tell they're not totally they're not working off each other completely yet. They're kind of still. It was way more apparent at the beginning of the season, but still throughout, they've kind of just been playing their own game almost. It's like they're not really using each other as much as they should be. Um, which again, it takes time to really get that chemistry into like a guy like for both of them to get used to having each other there, because
mhm.
Giannis has never played with a player like Dame. Dame has never played with a player like Giannis. They're not used to having that, and so um, Giannis just learning to be an off-ball guy more and improve as a roller. We've seen him struggle a little bit with it, just not totally comfortable in that doing that full time, and it's like that's what he's going to have to be later in the season, and so. get those reps in, run the pick and roll, get comfortable with each other. Really running the offense through Dame is the key. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I just think as the season goes on, they'll get better and better. They'll get more comfortable with each other, and things will start to get even easier. Um, but overall, Dame has, they've kind of just overall struggled to get Dame acclimated so far. They haven't been very good in Dame's minutes, and some of that is Dame struggling defensively and them not having another guard slash wing to really step up and carry some of that defensive load from Dame. I think at the deadline they're going to have to try to get someone like that, either a guard or a wing, Caruso, a Dorian Finney-Smith, to play that role of like, okay, Dame's not a good defender, but this guy can kind of make up for it a little bit and play some point of attack defense to make up for it. That's been a struggle with the Dame minutes.
Yep.
And then, again, he hasn't been the best offense or the best version of himself offensively yet, consistently. Obviously, we've seen some of the clutch stuff, which is awesome. We've seen him take over a little bit and win us a couple games, which is
Yeah.
great, but just not seeing it totally consistently. And um, and then the Giannis minutes have been much better defensively than the non-Giannis minutes. When Giannis goes to the bench, their defense has been atrocious. And again, just not having a ton of, before it's like, okay, Giannis would go to the bench, they'd still be able to run lineups with Drew and Brooke and be great defense and be still good defensively. Now it's like, okay, they're still figuring out how to use Brooke. And have Dame as point of attack defender, which is a huge downgrade from Drew. So when Giannis is going to the bench, it's just definitely much more of a struggle defensively than it has been in the last few years. And I don't know. It'll just take time. The whole thing is going to need to take time. What do you think of who should be the fifth starter moving forward? We've seen Malik Beasley start to lose some minutes,
Hmm.
going from last 4 games. He went from 31 to 25 to 22, all the way down to 14 minutes last game. What do you think of that?
I do like Beasley, but he feels a little bit more of as Bill Simmons likes to say, a heat check guy in some ways. But I like kind of the youth and a little bit more athleticism than say a Jay Crowder. But I do really like Crowder and what he brings. So if I had to say, I'd probably say Crowder because I think it gives you a little bit more size, a little bit more switchability on defense, and with how good he's been shooting the ball. But also, as we talked, just because you start doesn't mean you're going to finish the game. So I think more importantly, who's ending the game, type of thing. And if he wants to roll with Beasley and he only plays 15, 20 minutes, but they're ending with Crowder, that's fine. And as we saw last night, there's times where Brooke might get played off the court. We've seen that in the past too. So just being able to kind of play small ball lineups, you look at the Nets, they had pretty much Simmons and Finney Smith as the 4 and the 5, which Simmons has the size, but I think that's just something to maybe keep an eye on too.
And Malik hasn't been like awful. I mean, he's shooting 40% from three. His defense isn't like atrocious. It hasn't been good, but it's not awful. I just don't think he plays very well with the starters. I don't think um he's not really able to get enough shots to make a really good offensive impact. And then, if he's not doing a ton defensively, it's kind of like, okay, he's not really giving you a ton. Whereas so far, like guys like Jay and Marjan have been shooting the ball well enough and kind of getting open looks. I feel like more than Malik Beasley
Mhm.
when they're out there, and their defense has been better. So I'm I would probably say Jay would be my pick, and they've gone to Jay as the closer, which is the more important thing. I mean, that's ultimately like your your best lineup is going to be your closing lineup. It's not always necessarily going to be the starting lineup,
Yeah.
but that's what they've gone to as the closer is putting Jay in that spot, and I'm fine going with that as the starter and kind of trying to use that lineup even more. And all of this stuff will be helped, especially the offensive stuff, as you mentioned earlier. Chris gets to closer to his minute totals. I mean, he's only playing like 20 minutes a game right now. You're going to expect 10 to 15 minutes more as we get later in the season, and that's going to make a huge impact. I mean, we've seen him basically being the glue to this offense,
Hmm.
and it's like he's played so well. He's hitting his mid-range shots, he's getting open looks. He's able to create on his own a little bit. He's able to pass the ball pretty well. He's definitely the kind of key to the whole to unlocking the whole thing. And again, we know Giannis and Dame are going to kind of carry the load, but Chris being out there, Chris being himself, is the X factor for this team. And so that's one thing I think people are just underestimating is like, well, yeah, they're going to look worse when that X factor is playing 10, 15 minutes fewer than he normally will be. Like that's 10 to 15 minutes that you're just going to look worse. And
Mhm.
it's going to be more of a struggle. And so hopefully, again, as we get to the later in the season and closer to the playoffs, it's like they won't have as many stretches where they are struggling as much as they are because they'll have their best lineups out there. They'll have their best players all playing. And right now it seems like there's a lot of either solely Giannis or solely Dame lineups. Um, when you have Chris out there with one of those guys, it just makes such a huge difference. And then again, closing the games, it's like they've looked pretty good because of Chris being out there. So
Yeah.
last thing I want to say is the big difference that Dame has brought, even with his struggles, is the free throw attempts and getting to the line.
Yes.
9.5 attempts per game so far this season. Drew was at, in his tenure with the Bucks, 2.6 per game.
Wow.
So 7 free throws more per game. And this is just what Dame does. Like this isn't an anomaly. This is what Dame has done his whole career is he gets to the line, he's aggressive, he, hunts for fouls, and he's a great free throw shooter. And it's like that to me is a huge difference because in games like last night where Dame struggles from the field, I don't remember what exactly he shot. He was 5 of 15 from the field, but he still had 21 points. Whereas it felt like when Drew was 5 of 15 from the field, he's going to have, 12 points. And it's
Yeah.
like just having those extra points from free throws is always such a huge deal. And Bucks are now number 1 in the league in free throws attempted and number 3 in free throws made. So that is nice to have as kind of a backup plan. Your offense is struggling. Well, at least you're going to be getting to the line. At least you're kind of have that to rely on consistently. So that's been good.
And a
Uh,
great free throw shooter and a little bit better finisher, obviously, than Drew, as we've seen over the years. So, um,
yeah, he's so freaking quick, dude. His burst, just like Drew, they're so different in that Drew was kind of the methodical, back you down,
mhm.
use his strength type of guy, and he's not always going to draw fouls, but he's just going to kind of back down, and try to like throw up a little floater or try to finish over you. Whereas Dame is like hesitation, blow by you, get to the line, or hesitation, blow by you, finish, and they use their strengths in such different ways. They have such different strengths, and um, I don't know. It's very. I love what Dame brings offensively and the scoring potential he brings. Like it just you can see even when they're not playing that well, you can just see that they have such a higher ceiling than they did
Yeah.
before.
Mhm.
Like the potential is just so much greater. Let's talk quick other NBA stuff. What are your other NBA takeaways just through, the first couple weeks of the season, surprising teams, disappointing teams, players that have stood out to you? What are your takeaways?
Um, I guess a couple teams standing out so far. Mavs off to a great start at 6-1. Um, Lively's looked really good in a few of those games. Very aggressive. I think he could be a key guy for them with lob threat, blocking shots. Gives them different look than Dwight Powell minutes all the time. Um, and then the Sixers have been surprisingly good, but you and I have been big Maxi fans, and he's really shown out so far this year.
Dude,
Um,
he's averaging
Tobias,
26 and 7.
yeah,
Maxi's averaging 26 and 7, only one turnover, and he's shooting 50, 40, 90.
I was gonna say I think his 3-point percentage at like 47% the other day too.
Yeah, we love Maxi. I wish he was not on the Sixers so I could root
I
harder
know.
for him. But yeah, we love Maxi. I have like Mavs and Philly are kind of my two surprise teams of like, I mean, not that they weren't expected to be good, but just like, okay, they're sitting basically atop the standings at this point. And Philly's only losses to the Bucks, the Mavs' only loss is to the Nuggets. Um, they both been pretty impressive. And then as far as disappointing teams, I mean, there's a few of them. Suns haven't looked very good. I know they haven't been healthy, but still just have not looked great. Cavs have not looked very good. Grizzlies obviously have sucked. They're 1
Mhm.
and 6, I think, right now.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and they're, they have the injury stuff, but still, like that's a pretty talented team to be 1 and 6. And also the Kings. The Kings
Yep.
are
I had
not.
our Kings down.
I love our Kings, man, but they're kind of disappointing me.
De'Aaron Fox, I think, has missed the past 2, maybe 3 games, so that's part of it. But Even the first few games, they didn't come out as hot as last year. They haven't been scoring as many points. Obviously, if they can get Fox back healthy, start playing the offense like last year. But the Pacers might be looking like this year's Kings a little bit better than
Yeah.
people think. They put up 152 last night against the Spurs or two
Oh,
nights ago.
they'll score a ton. They're gonna give up a ton too, though, usually.
Yeah, they
But
do.
that's what the Kings were last year.
Yep. I think that's kind of my buddy had said that too. He's like, that feels like the Kings of this year, and I agree. I love watching Halliburton. He's another guy. Um, so yeah, I'll be interested to watch a few of those teams. Magic, as we like.
All right, if the playoffs started today, who and obviously they don't, but we're just hypothetically based on what you've seen through 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Playoffs start today. Who would you pick as the Eastern Conference Finals, the Western Conference Finals, and the championship?
I think I would have to go. It's going to be a little chalky, obviously, but
Yeah,
I would
no,
have
of
to go
course.
right now. Celtics, Nuggets. I think the one gripe with the Celtics is I'm not a fan of their bench and their depth. But if you told me right now with those five are healthy, I'm trusting them at least more than us, just how we looked.
Yeah,
And then Nuggets in the West, they returned their guys from last year for the most part. Jokic looks good. Murray struggled a little bit so far to start the year, but I'm
he got
taking.
hurt too, right?
I think he did, so he might be out. So I guess, and that would affect it. But based on how they've played so far, those would be the
Yeah,
the two for me.
yeah. Mine is Nuggets, Celtics as well. Right now we play Boston on the 22nd. I mean, I very much expect us to lose that game, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not gonna panic about that. Like they are gelling quicker than we are, and they didn't have to implement a whole new system. They don't have a new coach, so and just the guys that we got completely change our whole thing. Like it's just a total revamp of our team and how we play. Whereas theirs is not quite as much of that. So
Yeah.
naturally, they are looking better to start the year than us. And yeah, I'd pick Celtics, I'd pick Nuggets, and those as of right now look like the best teams. All right, briefly, let us go over Week 10 NFL Power Rankings. This is interesting now because the last time we did this, I'm pretty sure like the Niners were undefeated
Yep.
and looked like nobody was ever going to beat them. The Bengals were like absolutely trash, and the Cowboys were playing super well. Things have changed.
Yeah.
So, um, let me quickly share my thing here, and
I
we
think I'm
will
gonna
get.
have a nice little surprise at number one too.
You're gonna have a surprise at one.
I think. I don't know, maybe not, but I think people would agree if they've been kind of paying attention.
All right, go ahead. Number 10 for you.
Number 10, this is where I didn't really like the teams outside the top 9, but I went with the Cleveland Browns. They did give up a ton of points to the Colts, I know, but they get carried by their defense. Their offense has been somewhat serviceable outside, so I threw them in there.
My number 10, and I hate. Look, these teams at the end are good, and they're like I'll be honest, I fall in love with the offense. I fall in love with the fun teams and the teams I like to watch. So some of these teams, like the Browns, might be better than these teams and might beat these teams in a matchup. But I don't want to pick the Browns because I don't think the Browns are that good. They don't excite me. They don't excite me. Like they don't put fear into me if I was playing the Browns. Whereas my number 10 team is the Dolphins, which is kind of low. I know it's low.
Wow. Wow,
I
wow,
know. I
wow.
know.
Way too low.
My number 10 team is the Dolphins. Look, name me a good team they beat.
I'd have to look at their schedule, but I know they've lost a lot of their tough games.
So their wins have been against the Chargers. Okay, that's not terrible. Like the Chargers are fine. The Broncos, the Giants, the Panthers, and the Patriots twice. And their losses are to the Bills, Eagles, and Chiefs. So to me, they are like a fun team, a great offense, but when it comes down to it, I'm not picking them whenever they play one of the better teams. I think they are like a outside, like not an elite team, but they are a good team.
Yeah.
All right, 9. You're
Okay,
up.
number 9 for me, I got the Jacksonville Jaguars. Debated having them a little bit higher. But I just wanna they're another team where I wanna see it against a good team. I think they have. Who do they play this week? I think they might have a somewhat tough matchup. Do they play the Niners this week?
Let me check. Big schedule. Yeah, Niners at home.
That's going to be a very interesting game. Almost a I don't want to say a must win for the Niners, but that could continue a downhill slide for them, and this could be a statement win for Jacksonville.
My number 9, another team you might think this is too low, but I'm picking the Bills at number 9, and I
I
love the
don't
Bills.
think that's too low. I think that's too
I
high.
love I love you don't have them in the top 10?
I do not.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, they have some of the big names. They're just widely regarded as a very good team. They have one of the best offenses in the league, but their defense hasn't been nearly as good. They're too inconsistent, it seems like every year. It just there's games where they look like they're the best team in the league, and there's games where you're like, this is not a playoff team. Um, I do still have them at 9 because I believe in Josh Allen. I believe in Diggs. Even their running game has been not totally awful. It's just the defense has not been impressive, and I kinda like the Dolphins. I kind of question, like, anytime they're going up against the top competition, I'm like, I don't know. There's other teams I trust way more, so I'm not quite putting them in the elite category.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't have them in there, but and I guess I could have them over the Browns, but I just don't like the way they're playing, so that's why I kept them out.
Alright.
Number 8 for me is where I have the Dolphins. Kind of the same reasons you said. Great offense, defense is and when they've played some of the better defenses, a little bit of a struggle. Mike McDaniels is too worried about ripping the vape.
My number 8 is the Lions. Pretty balanced team, which I like. Like, I'm they're not the usual Lions where they're a good offense and a horrible defense. Their defense has actually probably been better than their offense, and I know they've had some injuries and they're getting healthy again, so they could easily go back higher on this list, but, um, they've played a pretty weak schedule, it feels like. Like, they beat the Chiefs week 1, but since then, it's like they've only played, like, 1 good team and 1 kind of good team, and the good team was the Ravens, who they lost to by 32, and then they lost to Seattle, who was the only other, like, pretty good team they played. So, I don't know, I haven't since week 1, which is a long time ago, I haven't really seen it against good competition, so I still think they're good. I think that they're good on both sides, but I'm gonna keep them at 8.
Okay. My number 7, I have the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe a little lower. Hard fought game this past week with the loss, and it's another team that kind of like you said with um forgot maybe it was the Bills, but just oh, no, you said with the Dolphins. They're just kind of on the outside looking in where they're good, but I don't trust them enough against the top 3 to 4 teams.
So I have Jags 7 and Cowboys 6. We talked about the Jags already. Big test coming up this week. Cowboys, dude, I want to like the Cowboys more than I do.
Hmm.
They are heating up, like in as far as just how their offense looks. I know they just lost, but um, they looked okay against the Eagles overall. It's just like they find ways to lose games.
Yep.
You never trust them. I like them on both sides. Like I really do. They're right now from EPA per play, they're 6th in offense and 4th in defense. So like one of the more balanced teams overall. Um, Dak has played well. CD Lamb is going off lately. It's hard for me to like really love them because you just don't trust them late in games. I can't really trust them. Best win is against the Chargers. So they don't have that signature win yet. I want to like them more than I do. And I probably have them too high. Like I still probably like them more than most people, but I just I don't know. It's hard to put them any higher than like 6 or 7.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Who's your 6?
Number 6, I have the 49ers. I don't like the way they've been playing.
Oh my.
I know I'm not trying to freak out, and I've been a Brock Purdy guy. But 14-point loss at home to the Bengals. They just had the bye week, so maybe they just need a reset. But Purdy's just he's looked a little different these past 2 to 3 games, making questionable decisions that he didn't make before. And I don't know if it's just them trying to, him trying to kind of have to make plays. They had that bad loss to the Browns, and then I mean they lost at Minnesota, I think it was, and Minnesota's been playing pretty well, and they had Kirk. But I, this is just one of those things where I don't like the way they're playing right now, and they could easily be back up to top 3 in a week or 2. But
That is fair. That is fair, but I disagree. Okay, top 5. I'm starting the top 5 with the Cincinnati Bengals, who are again, this is a team that like we wanted to just leave. I think we might have left them off our top 10 last time completely because they were
Yep.
1-3 at the time. And maybe one, I don't remember when we did our last one, but they were either 1-2 or 1-3, just looked awful. And you knew like, okay, it'll probably improve, but you just kind of weren't sure when, and they did have a difficult schedule coming up. So it was like getting really iffy for them. They have looked great the last 2 weeks, beat the Niners and the Bengals. Offense looks great. Burrow looks great. Higgins is back. Mixon looks good. It's all starting to click. And they're on a 4-game winning streak back up to 5-3. So like, yeah, they're back to being, a Super Bowl contender again, and they look good.
Yeah. Number 5 for me, I have the Detroit Lions.
So that's
Um,
too high.
See, I know they had the bad loss to the Ravens, who have played very good. But I like the way their offense has been clicking. Gibbs last 2 or 3 games starting to put it together. Laporta's a real threat. St. Brown's a threat when he plays. Um, I know it feels a little high. It just like you've said, who do you like right now against each other? I'm taking the Lions over the Niners based on how they've played.
My fourth is the Chiefs, who haven't been great offensive. I mean, they haven't been bad offensively, but just haven't been overly impressive for a team with Mahomes and Kelsey. Like just haven't been fantastic as an overall unit, and that's part of because they just don't have receivers and um, I but their defense is so good now that it seems like it's so hard to beat them. Like even if their offense isn't great, it's like just the fact that they have Mahomes plus a good defense. It's like that team is hard to beat. Somehow lost to the Broncos, which was very weird, but that's a division game, so it
Yeah.
always gets a little bit different for those. But I still have them. They're number 4 for me.
Number 4 for me, Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of the same reasons you said. Uh, Burrow looking a lot more like himself. Um, T. Higgins finally getting the ball thrown to him. Chase has been better past few weeks. So I like the offense. Defense has been stepping up, playing good.
All right, into the top 3. I have the Ravens at number 3. One of the more balanced teams, best rushing team, I would say, in the league. Their passing can be iffy sometimes. It seems like when they're forced to throw a lot, they're not quite as good, but still just a very balanced team. They look like a Super Bowl contender. They look like a team you can trust, and their defense is really, really good. So I have them 3.
Number 3 for me, I got the Kansas City Chiefs. Um, Been a few close games. I still don't really trust their offense, even though I trust and love Mahomes. And their defense
They've
has been
leaned on
games.
they've leaned on Pacheco quite a bit too, and he's been
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
been weird. Like they don't need Mahomes to be very like they don't need Mahomes to do a ton. And
No.
you're used to him like, okay, he's got to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that just hasn't been the case this year.
Right.
Um, I want to look up his like game logs because it feels like, I mean, he's thrown for 300 or more yards 1, 2, 3 times, and he's thrown for 3 or more touchdowns only 2 times. So, um, and that's in 6, 7, 9 games. So, just hasn't been the same type of team with them, but still, like it doesn't make them any worse necessarily. It's just that it's different.
Yeah.
My number 2 is the Niners. I know they're on a 3-game losing streak. I
Oh,
know it hasn't been pretty lately, but dude, when they're healthy, I just feel like because Debo's been out and CMC's been hurt a little bit, and I think they've had some defensive injuries. Now the defense that's the one actually like pretty concerning part to me is like the last 4 weeks, they're 29th in EPA per play allowed. Like that's very concerning, but I still just when they are healthy, there's not many teams I believe in more than them. And I just still think they're very well rounded, and I think they'll get back into shape here. And again, I mean, they lost at Cleveland, which is a very difficult defense to play against, at Minnesota, who started playing pretty well, and then they lost to Cincinnati, who's red hot right now. So like, I I don't know. I'm not totally concerned about the losing streak. I still think they're an elite team.
okay. That's fair enough. Um, Number 2, I have the Philadelphia Eagles, who I still have yet to be super convinced by, super blown away by, and I know they have another level to reach, but um,
Do you have the Ravens one?
I do have the Ravens one. I
All right.
and I don't love it. It's just like they feel like they're just playing so good right now. Obviously, this past week they blew out Seattle. They blew out Detroit a few weeks ago. They won by 7 at Arizona, which to some would be like, "Oh, Arizona sucks," but Arizona's been in some tough games. They beat the Cowboys a few weeks back. Dobbs had them actually playing pretty well, so I think that's a little bit more of a like solid win than people thought. And their offense just is clicking, and their defense is really good. So
Yeah, that's fair. I do have Eagles one. I mean, with them being 8-1, they have wins against the Dolphins. They have win against Dallas. I think I just kind of had to put them one right now. And like you said, I don't feel great about them. They haven't been insanely impressive, but they just find ways to win games, and I do trust them to win. Like I trust them, even if it's going to be kind of ugly, that they're going to win. Kind of similar to how I feel about the Chiefs, where
mhm.
like might not always be pretty, and it might not be the way you're used to seeing teams win, but they're going to kind of find a way to win. And defense hasn't been fantastic, but still, I trust them. This it is a weird time for the NFL. Like it feels like there's just not that many like teams you feel great about, and there's not that many quarterbacks you even feel great about. Like I don't know, it's just kind of a weird era. Like right now, it's I don't know if I like it or don't like it. Like it's there's not that many super fun teams and super exciting teams, but at the same time, it kind of makes for more parity, which is like exciting at the end of the year.
Yeah, I like there not being the like super dominant team. And like even with the Eagles, it's like, oh, they're 6-1 or 7-1, whatever they are, and it's felt like a lot of games they shouldn't win. Like it feels like they should have like 3 or 4 losses right now from the games I've watched. So um yeah, it's and it's such a big drop off. I mean, from 10 to 11, teams just aren't that good. So
Yeah. I know. I was thinking about like, okay, if I don't put the Dolphins in here at 10, like I'm either gonna put the Browns or the Seahawks, or like I'm like, I don't want to put the Seahawks in my top 10. They're not good.
we just got blown out last week. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it just I don't know. There's like there's just not that many elite teams, and there's a lot of just like there's so many meh teams. Like there's so many just below average, like boring kind of blah teams. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That does it for this episode. Good to talk some Bucks, and we'll keep talking Bucks as the season rolls along, and things hopefully get prettier for the Bucks and they get more acclimated. And we got college basketball starting. We got NBA will be rolling on, NFL season rolls on, so we will have more stuff in store. But thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Peace out.